Hello and welcome to Season 12, Episode 12 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop. Good
We
evening.
are, good evening, yes, we are, of course, reading Allan Bloom's The Closing of the American Mind, this time talking about the chapter Our Ignorance, talking about, kind of a reflection over the past section, which he says is about, American nihilism, and this chapter is kind of concluding about why we don't really recognize these things. He's gone through all these different thinkers, all these different schools of thought, how they've kind of come into America over the past, 100 years or so. And this last chapter, kind of concluding before we turn to the university, is kind of how did we get here? Why don't we recognize these things more readily? Why are they not sort of discussed more often? A good closing chapter, I think, to this section. I'm really more excited to get to the next section, which seems like it should have been, the crux of the book, but it seems like it's what he saved for the last. Is the part 3 is titled "The University," and it's just like almost one just huge, very long chapter. I don't know if you've looked ahead at all. But the next chapter goes on for like 60, 70 pages or something like that.
Pages.
It is a lot of pages.
I have not looked ahead. I don't like to ruin the ending.
Well, I didn't. I just meant if you flipped through the book.
I am now looking at the contents.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. It has, it has 3 parts in the third part, I guess.
Yes.
The first part is the longest of those parts.
That is true.
That to look forward to. So what did you think about this chapter?
I enjoyed
it. Do we want to say anything about the Charlie Kirk assassination? I know it's off topic, but
yeah, I mean, I guess we probably should. I mean, it's kind of the biggest news story to happen. I don't know, maybe in my lifetime. It's really insane.
Well, it's probably the most significant political assassination in American political history since Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I'm not equating the two, but boy, Charlie Kirk was really influential. He's like anyway. So I don't know. So it's a weird world we're living in when one of the few guys on the right, which was insisting on talking to the other side and trying to discuss things with the most insane people on the left of the political spectrum, gets murdered
Right.
live on the internet. I got home and I had dinner with Eli and your mother, and I mean, he's 17, so I shouldn't have been surprised, but he had already seen the murder from a distance and up close. Like, I guess that's the world we live in.
Right.
And we were just talking about it generally. He's like, "Oh, I've already seen the video." Like, oh,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no controlling
Right,
that.
right. I mean, that's one of his big audiences was the high school people. Like it is young people that were watching him, that were seeing all of his stuff. I mean, I remember watching a lot of his clips. I wasn't a huge follower of his. I mean, anytime you go on social media, you're bound to see a Charlie Kirk clip. Like no matter what, it just always comes up, and that's just the amount of influence that he had.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because I was not. I mean, I've never been critical of him as a cat, but when he was younger, I didn't think he was that great.
Right.
But he really worked at it in the last 2-3 years. I mean, he was really effective. Not like viral gotcha stuff. Like I think he's so much better than, and I'm not criticizing the other people like Michael Knowles.
Right.
Will sometimes take questions, and he does a good job. But Charlie Kirk had a gentleness about him in a way, and a sense of humor, and you really felt like he cared for people. I mean, and that's why it's just so wild that they killed the best of them.
Yeah. And what's even crazier is how many people were celebrating it. I'm sure you've seen all that stuff of the people who were either just excusing, the assassination, saying, oh, well, he was, this really horrible, terrible Hitler-like person. He was basically a Nazi, basically a fascist. And people would go even farther, not just excusing it and saying like, oh, he brought it upon himself, but saying he deserved it and it's a good thing and we should be happy about this, which is terrible. Because, I mean, it's one of those things. I've been talking about this with some of my friends. I haven't had anyone that I know express, any sort of good sentiment, towards the assassination or excuse it or anything. But seeing all this stuff like online and everything, I was talking like, how many people, when I go to campus every day, how many people, even if they're not saying so, agreed that it was a good thing that he was shot. And like to be surrounded by all these people and then thinking like, well, why do they think it was a good thing? Well, because he just believed some things and talked about them. And if anything, I believe things that are farther to the right than Charlie Kirk because he was a
Yeah,
moderate on a lot of issues. And like,
right.
how many people do I see on a regular basis would celebrate the fact that I died or was killed?
Yeah.
And would want that to happen. That's, I think, the scariest part to a lot of people because he wasn't a politician. He wasn't an elected figure. He was, of course, involved in politics and registered people for the Republican Party, but he wasn't a direct political person working in the government, right? And you always kind of like, because I was talking about that with some friends, like this is crazier than the Donald Trump assassination attempts because it's like, oh, you kind of expect that, right? You
Mhm.
expect he's president of the United States, very central figure in politics, things like that. But for the guy who just went around on college campuses and talked to people,
Mhm.
right? Like why is he the target? Because then it's like I saw other people saying this. It's like when the Trump assassinations attempts. It's like, oh, they're trying to kill the person who leads my party. And then when you saw like Charlie Kirk was killed, oh, they're trying to kill people who are like me, who are
Yes.
not that far removed from who I am in life, right? He was just more public about it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's really crazy.
Yeah. Those are all good points. And I think, I think I get the sense that people that are what they call like the normies, people who don't pay attention to politics. They're just middle
Hmm.
class people that I'm surrounded by. I think it's starting to dawn on them. Oh yeah, these people would just kill you.
Right.
They're
Right.
really they will.
Right.
Unless we stop it. And I've been thinking a lot about Donald Trump's reaction to it. He said we're going to go after the left wing extremists. He said, what about the right? He says, well, the right wing extremists are just upset about the lack of law and order. So they're upset about the law breaking, the
Yeah.
extreme right. And there's some truth to that. But what I found really important, and Trump is, as I've said before, like a savant, like he picks up on something. I think it was necessary to have Trump um, be an advocate as opposed to, like they say, well, he should be a president of everybody.
Right.
He should be. But I think it was necessary to let a little steam out of the boiler, so to speak, by having the president say those things.
Right.
Even though, it wasn't, in a way, it was calming because the people that felt attacked, who were attacked by proxy, have an outlet and know, the president's going to look into these left wing extremists,
Right.
like Senator Langford and the other ilk who are claimed to be Republicans, are like, oh, you have to go after the extremists on both sides. And that just is like gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
And I don't think people of the left, if there are any moderates left, understand how necessary it is to have that advocate out there so that we know we don't have to do anything to take retaliatory action to make it right. The government should deal with these left wing lunatics, and it's been building for years. I don't know
Yeah.
if you're Indian NGO.
Yeah.
His
And
last,
yeah.
and he's been documenting the Trantifa people for
Yeah.
what, years maybe,
Yeah.
and it's been spreading. I guess you might say it kind of originated in Portland and Seattle, but it's become a national problem. And of course, the shootings in Nashville and Minnesota. But then the border patrol agent was killed by a group of trans people that were going from state to state. There's a shootout. What is it, in Vermont? I think the border
Oh, I didn't
patrol
even
agent.
hear about that.
Oh yeah, there's a group of them. This is just within a month
Wow.
ago. So it's a trend. It's not
Hmm.
like one off this crazy lunatic. There's definitely activists. And then after I expected some BS on social media, but but it was weird for Charlie Kirk because, like you said, he wasn't a politician. He held no actual official power. And for people to be happy or pretend, I mean, they were all angry people, so they weren't really happy, but pretend to be happy about him getting killed is I think a wake up call
Yeah.
or is it a turning point? And it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think if there's widespread prosecutions, finally, of the criminal enterprises that are funding these riots across the country, which has been going on since, it's certainly since Michael Brown, which was the destruction, which should be called the destruction of Darren Wilson's law enforcement career, as opposed to the killing of Michael Brown. Um, but those were professional agitators, a lot of them.
Right.
paid for. Professional signs. Some people were expensing things.
Yeah.
That money wasn't coming from Ferguson
Hmm.
uh, back in 2015 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so if the federal government would finally wake up and do something about these interstate criminal enterprises that are responsible for billions of dollars worth of
Right.
property damage and a lot of killing, um, maybe we can get to the other side of this,
Right.
but it's an apt topic of this chapter, which is our ignorance,
Yeah.
and the nihilism or nihilism
Hmm.
the author keeps talking about is on full display with those people, those ungodly demons. Or like, oh yeah, we should kill Erica Kirk too. What the hell does she do? You know, she's a crying widow for crying out loud.
Right. Right.
What's the problem you have with her? I don't know.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, because I do like the topic here if we want to move into the book a
Yes.
little bit. Because he says here in the first page 227, he says a serious life means being fully aware of the alternatives, thinking about them with all the intensity one brings to bear on life and death questions, and full recognition that every choice is a great risk with necessary consequences that are hard to bear. And essentially his point is here throughout, it's like we just kind of accept these things that have kind of, been incorporated into American culture, into American life as just like the bedrock of society. Like these are things we've always held to be true, and these are things that are true everywhere for all time. We just don't even realize that there are alternatives we should be thinking about. It is just kind of this sense that the nihilism is, the correct option forever. And all of
Yeah.
these ideas, that's all that there is. We don't really need to look at anything else because we have everything we need, which is clearly just not true, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and he mixes in like an analysis of literature and art, which
Yeah.
it's kind of jarring, but I think it's well placed. Like the quote, to continue the quote
Hmm.
beyond what you said, I highlighted the word it says next, which is that is what tragic literature is about. It articulates all the noble things men want and perhaps need, and shows how unbearable it is when it appears they cannot coexist harmoniously. And I think that's really what a lot of what our reaction to the Charlie Kirk murder
Yeah.
is that it's just such a tragedy that we it's like we so many people know what we need to live harmoniously and really idyllically in this country, if only we would just allow it to happen.
Right.
Like everybody would say, okay, yeah, we could just talk these things out. um, but that it can't exist, and that's what is really tragic about the whole thing, is that because of the decisions we're making as a society,
Right.
keeping us from the ignorance of some people are keeping us from you know existing harmoniously with those ideals. I don't know.
Right. Because he says on the next page, he says, we, on the other hand, have taken these words, referring to all these, works of literature and things like that, which point toward a rich load of serious questions and treated them as though they were answers in order to avoid confronting them ourselves. It's like we don't want to consider that, hey, maybe there are, there is a place for God in public life and for religion in public life. Hey, maybe there is such thing as actual truth and everything isn't just relative to something else. Hey, maybe there is something other than just enforce your will and that is all that politics is. It's like, no, we just kind of have the answers that we have now. We don't want to look any further.
Yeah.
And it's like, because I mean, that's, kind of my complaint. And I know I've complained about this to you before, maybe on the podcast too, about, my field is that we don't ever look at anything like prior to 150 years ago. It's like, well, I mean, people have been thinking about language for a very long time. There's more answers out there than just, what the people over the past century have had to say. There's a lot more out there.
And the author, we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, it actually mentions language in this
Yeah,
chapter.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I really like those are good points, and he says in that middle of page 228, and he talks about like the trade-offs and choices.
Hmm.
He said, now when we speak of the right to choice, we mean that there are no necessary consequences, that disapproval is only prejudice, and guilt only a neuroses. And boy, that's the truth.
Yeah.
Like so if I express disapproval, that's prejudice,
Hmm.
of your choice. And if you feel guilty, it's just some sort of neuroses or mental illness or something. You just need to do something to, make yourself happy, live your best
Right.
life, so to speak. And it's just so toxic. And that's really what our society has
Hmm.
become. We're saying, well, there's really no trade-offs.
Right.
There's no tragedies
Right.
except for when you're not fully self-fulfilled.
Right. Because that's what he says a little bit later. It's like we're just always trying to avoid conflict. He says conflict is the evil we most want to avoid among nations, among individuals, and within ourselves. And he's like saying, like, yeah, choice is a good thing, to a degree, because choice is what lets us find, what is the better good, right? If we have a lot of different choices in society, then it should be under the like guise of, well, we're trying to find which one is the best.
Yeah.
But instead, it's just we all kind of just pretend that everything can coexist all at the same time. And so long as you are choosing your choice and I am choosing my choice, then everything's fine. And now we're at a stage in the history of America where it's just nobody agrees on anything, even the most fundamental things, because we've just gone so far down the avenues of do whatever your choice is, and don't stop ever to think about, hey, maybe the other side could be right, maybe there is an objective truth here, and that one of the choices isn't really a choice at all because it's wrong.
Yeah. And this conflict avoidance, I'm going to make an analogy which may not be apt, but I thought
Uh-oh.
of it. I was reading it. Like in the legal field, I'm a strong believer in the jury trial system,
Yeah.
and that more cases should be tried to a jury and just decided you either win or lose. But since it really started when I was in law school, so it's been a long time, 30 years. They've been the legal infrastructure hierarchy have really been pushing mediations. We have to get together and settle the case. And the mediators say, well, if we can't come to an agreement, nobody's happy. That's the best result. I'm like, are you retarded? I want to be happy.
Yeah.
Um, but it's this conflict avoidance that it is not an ideal.
Hmm.
I mean, and I don't mean violence. I mean, sometimes there's a conflict of opinions. There's a conflict of ideas,
Right.
and sometimes the other side's wrong. Sometimes there should be a verdict 100% in favor of either the defendant or the plaintiff,
Hmm.
and we have to just push it through and let the decision happen,
Right.
and argue about it, and somebody wins and somebody loses. But I think it's an example of how society has changed.
Right.
Back in my predecessors' days, they would have jury trials like every other week. I haven't had a jury trial in over a year. I think it's been a year and a
Wow.
half.
Wow.
I'd love to have jury trials, but they all settle.
Hmm.
Um, and the judges push you. You can't get a trial. You can't even get a trial setting sometimes until after you've done a mediation.
Right.
And sometimes the mediation takes longer than the trial. Like you have a day and a half mediation, and I could have tried it in like 5 hours.
Hmm.
So, anyways, that's my little bitching
Right.
about legal. But I think it's kind of an analogy of how nobody wants to have winners or losers with regard to big philosophical debates, and
Hmm.
sometimes like you say the trans issue is hot on my mind right now, but they're just wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, the pronouns are just wrong, and we should just say no. We're not going to
Right.
accommodate it. We're not going to do it. You can do whatever you want in the privacy of your own home, but it's not going to come outside of those doors
Right.
with our consent, and that means you lose the argument.
Right.
Now, if they won the argument, they would be insisting that I comply with their philosophy. So it's like the other side's playing win or lose,
Right.
but I'm supposed to compromise on everything, and I think
Right.
we're done.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a very big problem for sure. But yeah, he continues on because he goes and he says like this weird optimism that we have that if we just kind of let everybody do their own thing, then we're gonna have like all this sort of synthesis of these ideas where everybody's gonna kind of do their own thing, and everything's gonna be fine. Or he says gives Marx's formula that mankind never sets problems for itself which it cannot solve, and he also quotes Roosevelt: "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." He says this optimism is a national strength and is connected with our original project of mastering of nature, but that project itself is not unproblematic and makes sense only when kept within limits. One of these
yeah,
is the sanctity of human nature. And once you start
mhm,
going beyond nature, once you start trying to go beyond these boundaries, once you say, well, yeah, there is nothing we have to fear besides fear itself. I can do whatever I want. I shouldn't be afraid of these consequences. I shouldn't be afraid of transcending, nature and the natural law and things like that. Then we get into a very, very bad place very, very quickly.
yes,
Because you see that a lot with like people, quoting, this president or that president on like the virtues of tolerance and letting people do their own thing and things like that. You go back to the founding fathers, you could find quotes like that, and, all about freedom and things like that. But what people don't recognize or choose to not mention is that all of these things were said in a much more Christian, a much more, morality centric society, where their idea of freedom is not at all what we think of freedom now, where it's, just do whatever you want and nobody can stop you and, fulfill every desire you've ever had. They would look at that and be appalled.
Yes.
It's just not at all their conception of what that meant.
Yeah. When you look back, it wasn't too long ago that adultery was a crime. It was a
Yeah.
felony
Yeah.
in all 50 states. Sodomy was a crime, a
Yeah.
serious crime
Yeah.
in
Blasphemy,
all
even.
50 states. Blasphemy, yes, correct. I mean, so, and certainly were, the colonists, when they're first starting this country, there were certain assumptions about standards of conduct and modesty that would be abhorrent now, but it was the given. And so when they're talking about tolerance, they're talking about whether or not Mary ascended into heaven. That's
Yeah.
that's really you need to tolerate the Catholics' view of the ascension.
Yeah. The assumption. Yeah.
Assumption, sorry, thank you. Because there were wars fought over that stuff.
Right.
What they were talking about when they're talking
Right.
about tolerance, they're talking about philosophical and religious principles
Hmm.
and beliefs, not, hey, I want to have an orgy, with 30. Well, what's that one gal that's like trying to set a record for being the biggest internet whore in the
Yeah.
world? Um,
I,
oh my
I saw the
God.
headlines about that.
Oh,
Yeah. Terrible.
I'm just, I'm not shocked by a lot of things anymore. I mean, I've been around the block a few times, but my God. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Well,
But,
speaking of that, because he mentions
but
that here in, or sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because I was just going to say on 230, he says, this is directly related to what you're talking about. He says, man has always had to come to terms with God, love, and death. They made it impossible to be perfectly at home on earth, but America is coming to terms with them in new ways. God
Mhm.
was slowly executed here. It took 200 years, but local theologians tell us that he is now dead, as his place has been taken by the sacred. Love was put to death by psychologists. Its place has been taken by sex and meaningful relationships. That has taken only about 75 years. It should not be surprising that a new science, thanatology, or death with dignity, is on the way to putting death to death. And it continues on from there. And man, is that true? Because now we're seeing really the full scale consequences of that last part. 'Cause, I mean, that wasn't fully realized in his time writing this in the 80s. But
Yeah.
now we're really seeing that, where death is seen as this good thing, this release from suffering with all of these, physician assisted suicide, things like that. I mean, it's really just terrible. But I mean, on those first 2 points, I mean, case in point with your example about the discussion of love, love has definitely been put to death in the sort of sense that it should probably be thought of.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say I would get optimistic every once in a while. I think though, it's turning. I think we've hit the now. Is the nadir that the highest point? What's the lowest point?
Let me
I,
check. Let me double
I
check
always
because I do get those confused
I
too.
always get that wrong. So I think we're at the trough. I think that's
Hmm.
the lowest point. Is
The,
that we
the
can't?
nadir is the lowest point.
Oh, we're in the nadir. Oh,
Yes.
interesting. It's almost right. Uh, I think it's turning. However, we still have. I guess we still have a little ways to go. But like the back when he was writing this was probably during the Dr. Jack Kevorkian days. So he was the first real prominent assisted suicide guy, because assisted suicide was a felony in all 50 states. I think it still is in most states. But like you have in Canada, assisted suicide for non-terminal
Right.
conditions, including I have the SADS.
Yeah.
And they're encouraging people. And of course, this was always the biggest danger, and the reason why people were so vehemently against government-funded healthcare is it becomes a cost-benefit analysis.
Right.
But like Sarah Panel and the others were talking about the death panels. It really is where we'll end up if we do not value the individual value of every human life, every innocent human life, and he's talking about that when this was written years ago.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I think, and of course, you see anecdotal stories about people going back to church after Charlie Kirk got killed. So maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But I do like this quote because I do I do see this value. Like I forget, so one of my friends is like, "Why do you still go to church every Sunday?"
Hmm.
And I said, sometimes I wonder, but if nothing else, it forces me to sit in a pew and without my phone because it's you can't look at your phone when you're in church. That's so so I'm there uninterrupted while essentially I'm harangued as a sinner for an hour. I mean, and there's a benefit for that. As he mentions, on Sunday mornings, educated men used to be harangued about death and eternity, made to give them a bit of attention. This is not a danger to be run in doing battle with the Sunday New York Times.
Hmm.
And that's just such a beautiful way to say it too, because like if you're not going to church, you don't have somebody once a week telling you you're a sinner and you need to repent, do
Right.
better.
Right.
And I need it. I need to just be able to sit there, keep my mouth shut, and have a priest. The readings, of course. A reminder how I'm not living up to the standards. Just like my little Jesus statue on my dash reminds me that I'm not being a very Christian driver. But the author mentions this and how important it is,
Right.
and how society, when you have a church going population, even if you don't believe, you know, it's still it's still good to submit to a lecture about how you could be better once a week. Uh, and so many people don't even go to church. They don't want to miss their Sunday football pregame
Right.
show.
Right. Because he moves on from there and he says, we've suppressed all of these sort of things that we should naturally be very worried about, God, death, and love. And he says, and now you have this different sort of morality that's coming out of that. It's like talking about your, repressed desires and things like that. And that's sort of where you get all this language really from Freud and stuff like that we see all the time nowadays. It's like, well, you really just need to open up and let those desires and fulfill those desires and things like that, rather than face these more important questions. And it's like sort of this weird paradox because we've set up a society that wants to, that kind of puts all of those things lower, the real questions about God and death and love. And then its solution isn't to say, hey, maybe we should be having those more important conversations again. It's like, hey, let's actually just trivialize these things even more. And that's the release. That's the idea that will bring us out of this real big slump that you're in. That's what we need to do. And it's like, well, that's actually the opposite of the thing that we need to do. I think we actually need to consider those questions more rather than just ignoring them and pushing them under the label of something else, something much more trivial.
Yes. Yeah, he talks about that. I'm at 233 where he says, this brought into the Lockean world the second focus of human nature, the one concentrated on by Rousseau and those he influenced. The basic rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of property and sex. Here's a quote on here: "Give us your poor, you're sexually starved."
Yeah.
Just it trivializes.
Hmm.
It trivializes humanity,
Hmm.
it gets back to my thing I keep going back to for the last year about the desecration of man. It's
Right.
like we don't treat people like they
Hmm.
have souls, for crying out loud.
Right. Because you see that, with so much of the rhetoric is like, well, we were just, shaking off these past,
Mhm.
several hundred years of this repression, these horrible societies just really did not let you be yourself and things like that and held you back and all these things. When in reality, the society we had a long time ago was just considering these things much more deeply and figuring out what they actually were. And that is much more fulfilling and much more freeing in a way because you're not just a slave to sin. You keep going down this path, just a slave to your desires, which is what the new idea is.
I've noticed. I think it's about 100%, and about meaning exactly 100% of the people that have decided to let loose the bonds of repression and express their true self are all self-absorbed bad people.
It's,
You
it's,
know,
it's remarkable how that happens.
it's 100% of them.
Yeah.
Well, I'm liberated. I cast off the repression and the false sense of self. That's what a lot of these um, dudes that are hanging out in women's restrooms are. Oh, well, I was really a woman. Now I'm free. And
Hmm.
why is it that every one of them is a bad person? You know, and I'll tell you why. Because all of us would be a bad person if we didn't control our base appetites.
Right.
And and that's the whole point of life is trying to improve the things that are good about you and suppress or repress the things that are bad about you. I mean,
Right.
generally speaking, now of
Right.
course you have to figure out which one's which.
Right.
But my Lord, the people that are like, "Oh, I'm now free of the constraints," it's like every one of them goes down in the sewer.
Yeah. That's terrible.
Why aren't the people that let go of the restraints like just purely good people? You know, it's
Yeah.
like, no, they're just not. You know, the disciplined people are the ones that actually get good stuff done.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Ranting.
On the topic of like the former, past repressive society and stuff like that, I've a professor here at the Hamilton School I really, really like. And he's gone on many rants at this point to me about how we need to stop using like the terms dark ages or
Mhm.
even like medieval, because medieval implies that it's just a period between two more important periods. The classical, the ancient, and then modernity, and everything before that's just the medieval time, the time between the two. And he's like, no, we need to bring back either like the Latin age or the golden age of Europe, the age of Christendom. And I'm like, I absolutely agree. I mean, now that you mentioned that, I mean, yeah, we're kind of like living in a point in time where it's just you just keep putting down this particular period in history where I think basically all of the really critical, most important developments of the West, of Western civilization, were happening.
Yes.
Building on the ancient tradition and sort of incorporating them into the Christian worldview. I mean, that is where you had really the heights of philosophy and theology, and we have not gotten anywhere close to that since. Everything that we've done since then has been really, really good. I think is in every single way dependent upon the things that were happening then.
Isn't that amazing? I was actually thinking about that earlier today.
Really?
Noon when I was on my lunch hour driving along, like, you know, I think that was the peak.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, because I used to think, the 20th century, the early 1900s,
Hmm.
40s, 50s, all this technical advances, or at least since the Industrial Revolution, that's the peak of humanity. I don't think it was.
Yeah.
I think, granted, technologically, it
Hmm.
was a much more brutal physically world, but like that, the Middle Ages or medieval times, a
Hmm.
lot of that, there's a lot of really tremendous intellectual
Right.
advance.
Yeah, I mean, I sit sometimes because I have my whole 5 volume set of the Summa Theologiae in Latin over there that's published from in 1887 that I got for like $50 online, which is crazy that I got it for that cheap. And I
Bought it
think
by the
like
pound, like a dollar a pound.
probably actually, and I think about that sometimes. It's like we were writing things like that,
With
and
a
now,
quill, with a quill.
right,
This guy wrote it by hand and had to dip his quill in an inkwell.
right,
Somehow wrote like a million words during his
right,
lifetime. I mean,
yeah, if not more,
and the stuff that still holds up today.
yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's like, well, because we have better dentists now, we are a morally superior society. We're the peak society. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm glad we have modern hygiene. I'm glad we have modern doctors. I don't want to go back to everything about
Yeah.
800 years ago, but assuming that we're the height intellectually and morally, I think is very, very wrong.
I like when like it's a fun thing to like when people mention, oh, we're so much better now than before, and they'll mention like some rudimentary technological advance, like a computer or even a toaster. I got to tell you, I'd have a hard time creating a toaster from scratch.
Yeah.
I mean, I might be able to figure out because I know it's an electrical circuit, and the electricity current, heats up the filament, and that toasts the bread
Hmm.
essentially. That's a simple device. I'd have a really hard time making that without you having an actual toaster as an example.
Hmm.
And what about a TV or a microwave oven?
Yeah.
No
Would
way.
I be able to
I don't even understand.
explain?
It's a magic box. I mean, a microwave oven is literally a magic box. I put things in there, I press buttons, and it comes out hot. It's like witchcraft to me. I don't know what that is. I'm still amazed that it doesn't kill us. Like
Right.
because I existed in a time before microwaves. When I was a
Hmm.
little kid, they didn't have microwave ovens. They had ovens. They had stoves. And so microwave ovens it was a thought when I was a kid. Well, they're going to cause cancer, or they're going to do this or that. I still think it's probably dangerous,
Hmm. Yeah.
but
I
it
mean, I think
really
about that.
cooks popcorn like crazy. It's great. 3 minutes, and I've got a full pop. I don't have to put the oil in the pan. That's what you used to have to do.
And I think about that sometimes, the people are like, oh, we have the internet now, we're so much smarter than the people in the past. And it's like, would you be able to explain Wi-Fi to
No,
anybody? Like, how do I explain to someone? Like, I'm sitting here with the
imagine.
computer in front of me, I'm hearing your voice and seeing your face, and not only that, I'm recording it so I can watch it later at any point in time that I wish. How do I explain that? Right? I have no way of explaining that.
No, and there's a sense of me that thinks that those like primitive people, when you took their picture, they thought you captured their soul. I'm starting to think they were right. I think they had some wisdom I didn't understand. Like, I don't understand this. It's complete magic to me. It's
Right.
it's it's fantasy. And people are like, well, we're better now. No, we're not. No,
Right.
we have less knowledge. I think I could probably figure out how to milk a cow, but you know why I could? Because it took you boys to that Susan Park. They had a demonstration of how to milk a cow when you were kids. If I didn't have that, I kind of know it in theory, but really, would I be able to? I mean, eventually, I guess I'd be able to figure it out how I
Uh-huh.
was going to do that if I didn't have milk. But the people of that age knew so much more
Right.
practically, and the educated people were. I mean, I guess they weren't smarter because there's so many people that are smarter than me. But anyway,
Right.
went on a rant.
Well, I mean, even not just. I'll say one more thing, and then we'll get back to the book here. But I've been reading, just started reading Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, philosophical work written in the 500s when Boethius was imprisoned. And I was reading the introduction to it in the first little bit there, and there's a little neat little part there about his life in prison, because the work is just strewn throughout with references to Greek and Latin poets, to Saint Augustine, these other like just to scripture. And so the author of the introduction was saying, well, unless he had literally his entire library brought to him when he was in prison, these are all just things he had memorized, just off the top of
Yes.
his head that he just knew and could recall instantly, right? So we think about them. Well, they were much more, equipped and much better at these very, simple sort of physical processes. They could farm better. They knew, the seasons better, the earth and animals and things like that. I think they also, at least the educated, knew literature a lot better and knew, philosophy a lot better. That they could just recall all of these things immediately.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's also a big difference.
So is it any good? I have that book
Mhm.
downstairs. I have not started
It's
it.
good. It's good. I don't know how it fits in your style of things that you like because it's part poetry, part prose. Because
Hmm.
it's written as it's what the title says. It's a consolation to philosophy. So he's talking to a figure that is representing philosophy,
Okay.
and so it's neat so far. I haven't gotten very far into it. It's pretty short though. I
Sounds
do
like I
enjoy
should
it.
have 3 glasses of wine before I start.
I think that's a good
And
idea.
read it as if it's I'm acting out a play in a toga or
Yeah,
something.
there you go. But then he continues to go back to the books, makes another really good point here that I think's really relevant right now. Because he's talking about the lifestyle, right, and all this stuff with the sexual liberation, and everything's just a lifestyle, and everything's fine. And he says all the supporters of these things, which would have been, clearly rejected at any point in human history, he says now they can call upon all the lovers of human rights throughout the world to join in their defense. For the
Mm,
threat to any group's rights is a threat to them all. Sadomasochists and solidarity are bound together in the common cause of human rights, their fates depending on the sex of the success of the crusade in their favor.
yeah.
And that's very right, and that's something that you're seeing now, where it's like, well, I personally disagree that someone should, have joy and revel in the murder of another human being. But who am I to say that is their right to free speech? You see some of that, from people on the right. It's like, well, we should, even support them in saying that because, I should support you to say whatever you want. When clearly that can't be true. That
Yeah.
cannot possibly be true. But we've so bound together the idea of a right is you are able to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
That's just not the case. Sometimes rights actually, if it is a right, it cancels out another right, which is the right to not have someone rejoice in your murder. I
Right.
would consider that a right of a human being.
Well, what struck me in this is I don't know if I'm skipping ahead too far.
No, that's right.
The top of ended 238 and
Mhm.
239. It makes a point about nihilism as moralism, and
Mm,
I thought that really was that is the message for today's society. I think that is our common culture, which is nihilism is moralism.
mm,
Like these that is their sense of morality, or as an American society, our sense of morality is nihilistic.
right.
I think he's onto something there.
Right.
That it's just it's like self hatred and hatred of the good and the beautiful and the
Right.
cultured, and it's a cynicism. And of course, I'm a cynic,
Right.
uh, but with regard to some things. But I think he really I think he really gets it as far as that is concerned. That this is it's almost like an anti-morality
Right.
morality. Like
Right. Because
you
it's
have to not have morals in order to be
mhm.
morals.
Right. Because it's immoral for you to have very hard morals, right? If I say, no, this thing is right and
Yeah,
this other thing is wrong, well, then that's you infringing upon somebody else's choice. The only
yeah,
stance you can have is that you have no stance on anything.
yeah.
And that is all that you are allowed to do.
All you can do is be permissive of
Right.
others.
Right.
And
And
if you're not permissive, then
yeah.
you're holding them back.
Right. This is something else, not to keep talking about Charlie Kirk, but I think it's it's very important to talk about this, and it's hard not to. But I've seen other people saying the same thing is that they if they'd had conversations with people who were excusing the murder or celebrating the murder, they would say, well, I believe a lot of those same things. Or talking about earlier conversations, maybe it's not even related to that, but I think you could go back for however long and say, oh well, Charlie Kirk's a fascist, blah 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 blah. He believes this and this and this, and people would point out, well, I believe those same things that Charlie Kirk did. What does that make me? And I saw multiple people talking about this point is that the leftists or whatever would say, well, yeah, but you didn't talk about them. You
Yeah,
weren't, a public figure. You weren't bringing them up, right? And so it's like it's only okay to believe those things if you do nothing about it. If you don't
yeah,
say that you believe them, right? You're allowed to believe those things just as long as I don't have to hear about it. Keep it to yourself. Don't
yeah.
say that you have any morals, and that's the attitude of a lot of people.
Well, was it Dostoevsky? I'm trying to remember who it was. It was somebody who was writing during communism that said that when your freedom to think gets so restricted, it's only within your own head,
Right.
and you can't share it with anybody because if you share it, you're otherized and destroyed. And then they invade your mind by making you recite lies.
Hmm.
And even though they know it's a lie, they have to make you say it to conquer your intellect and your internal morality. So then you can't even protest in your own mind because they're making you overtly state lies. And
Right.
it's this really weird. But I think that the author is right. It's just a nihilistic religious philosophy,
Hmm.
which you can't have a nihilistic religion, but that's as it really is a religion of nihilism,
Right.
of self-hatred and destruction.
Right.
But I do get optimistic from time to time, and I feel as if it's hit the end of the road. I mean, you can only go so far without people saying, "Wait, I'm lost."
Right.
I look around, I'm surrounded by these weirdos. I mean, even the weirdos have a sense that the other weirdos are weird. Like these are bad people. Oh
Right.
man, I'm one of them. And I think some people just need to get to the end of that path before they'll turn around
Hmm.
and not just be an example for the others, so to speak.
Right.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
hopeful.
Yeah, we could see, and he does provide a way that we can get back to something better here at the bottom of 239. This is where he talks about language, as you mentioned. He says,
Oh
"What is so
yeah,
paradoxical is that our language is the product of the extraordinary thought and philosophical greatness at which this cursory and superficial survey has done nothing more than hint." Talking about all these terms, these lifestyle values that we just sort of ingrained in ourselves as products of American culture at this point. But he says there's a lifetime and more of study here, which would turn our impoverishing certitudes into humanizing doubts. To
mm,
return to the reasons behind our language and weigh them against the reasons for other language would in itself liberate us. I've
yeah,
tried to provide the outline of an archaeology of our souls as they are. We are like ignorant shepherds living on a site where great civilizations once flourished. The shepherds play with the fragments that pop up to the surface, having no notion of the beautiful structures of which they were once a part. All that is necessary is a careful excavation to provide them with life-enhancing models.
yeah,
And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
yeah.
But a lot
That
of
was a
things, yeah,
beautiful
yeah.
description of it. I think. Yeah,
I agree. I think a lot of things need to happen first to make it, politically viable to raise those questions, right? Because, as we kind of saw recently, if you ask too many of the questions, you're seen as inherently an enemy. But there needs to be something that takes place that allows us to have those to raise those questions again, to examine, where we're getting these ideas from. Is it really true? Are these ideologies really, inherently true for all time, or are they something that we've kind of just, shaped over the past 100 years or so? And recognizing that there's much more, underneath us, that we're kind of just on this flimsy portion of it. If we don't recognize, the foundations that are below us, we're just gonna kind of fall off the edge, and there's not going to be nothing.
Well, and this is where my optimism comes in. It doesn't take a lot of people to say enough.
Right.
It takes that was my. I'm going to talk about mention COVID. I haven't mentioned COVID this episode. That was my biggest disappointment in the COVID years is that if you had 10% of the people be completely non-compliant, none of the restrictions would have worked
Right.
from the beginning, and then it would have just spread. There was maybe 1%, and then it was 2%. It took too long for us to get to some sort of critical mass. But I feel like, maybe, of course, it's just been a few days since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I get the feeling like people are like, you know what? I just got to step up. I
Right.
got to say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put pronouns in my signature block at work.
Yeah.
And we just need enough people to say when we're on a Zoom call, wait, why do you have pronouns by your name? And all you have to do is ask, and I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I haven't had to do it in a long time because I don't do a whole lot of group Zooms, but it's like, what am I stupid? I know the
Right.
English language.
Right.
There is no such thing as they them. There's one of you on the screen. What are you trying to pull?
Right.
It's honest. Yeah, that's all you got to do is say that.
Right.
What are they going to do? Oh, they'll be mad at you. But better than getting shot in the neck. I mean,
Yeah.
because that's what they want to do to us.
Right.
If we push back, we only have to push back. Only need because out of 100 people, only one person's going to do that, but 99 are like, thank God he said it.
Yeah.
And then if one person says it, then somebody else will say it. You don't have to expose yourself too much, but I think I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic that enough people will be like, yeah, I'm just not playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can play your games at your own house, but I'm not doing it today, and let's just move on.
Right.
And a lot of it just needs to be ignored.
Right.
It's like you need to do this. No, I don't. I don't need to play that game.
Right.
Use the other bathroom. It's okay.
Right. Right.
You'll be right.
Right. Yes, I'm, sometimes I'm hopeful, sometimes I'm not, like you are. But no, I think he's right. You just need to raise these more important questions, and if enough people do it, if people start having these conversations again, that's what needs to
Now,
happen.
I will say this. I'll get on the negative side. This book was written many years ago.
Yeah,
It's only gotten worse. He's identified all these trends, and they all gotten worse.
that is
But
true.
but maybe we're at the turning point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can
So,
see. We can see. What do you have any other final thoughts?
oh, I got a lot of thoughts, but
Oh, I know you do.
it's late.
Yes, that is true.
For next episode and the massive reading I'll have to do for this.
Yes. Oh, I think we'll split the next chapter up into a few sections.
Well, it's into 3 anyway. Or you
Yeah.
want to which we can split the next one. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll see. We'll see. But this has been season 12, episode 12 of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions. I have been Adam Bishop.
Still Mark Bishop.